Mirror, mirror on the wall, whose wish shall be granted today? Midori draws Lonely Castle in the Mirror, which is based from a Japanese novel by Mizuki, Tsujimura, and published by Poplar Publishing in May 2017. The novel is available in Goodreads, and the animated film is available to watch now on Netflix. Wait up, I just found out that this has a manga, so I might read this later on. The title is quite different. It's called The Solitary Castle in the Mirror. I think I prefer this title better. Disclaimer: this video contains material that may be considered offensive, triggering to some viewers. This includes themes of bullying, discrimination, and sexual content. Viewer discretion is advised. If you are sensitive to such topics, you may wish to consider this before proceeding. Also, this is not a spoiler-free review, so if you haven't watched the animated film yet, or read the manga or novel, watch at your own risk. Now, if you are here even after reading and listening to the disclaimer, then I assume you are comfortable with me discussing such topics. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Lonely Castle in the Mirror is a fantasy and fictional story about 7 students who were chosen by the mirror, which is a portal to another world that offers temporary escape from their stressful lives. Upon arrival in the other side of the portal, Kokoro Anzai was welcomed with a little girl wearing a dress and a wolf mask. She was told that she was the last to arrive, and when Kokoro tries to escape, the girl managed to pull her back and introduce her to the rest of the pack. Get it? Pack? Because she's a wolf? The girl in the wolf mask introduced herself as the Wolf Queen and introduced who the rest of the teenagers were. She addressed her pack as the Little Red Riding Hoods and instructed them to find a single key in the castle, in which would allow their wish to be granted. However, only one of them could do this, and the rest of them shall forget everything that happened. No memories of their meeting, nor them entering such castle. They were only allowed to enter the portal between 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Yes, it's like a school or an office schedule, which was funny. But what's not funny was staying after 5 p.m. as anyone who stays beyond that time shall be eaten by the big bad wolf. I think it's based on both fairy tales of the wolf and the 7 little goats and the Little Red Riding Hood. Remember this as I will discuss this during my review. They have a deadline up until March 30 of the next year to find the key and gets to pick who gets to have their wish granted. During their stay, they only hung out and did not take things seriously. They get to know a bit of information from one another, but just the general one, as they were not ready to open up to a mere stranger they just met in a magical mirror. Genre: fantasy, fiction, Japanese literature, drama. Fuka was considered to be the first kid, just like in the fairy tale of the wolf and the 7 little goats, because she was the oldest among them. So Fuka, being forced by her mother to play piano and has to win on competitions. However, she fails to do so on some attempts. Asian parents, am I right? Welcome to our world. Not all parents or families are quite supportive of the path their children takes. Most of them dictate what they couldn't achieve when they were young. Similar to the piano prodigy of Your Lie in April's Kosei Arima. They want their children to be prodigies, to be perfect, to have someone to brag about to their families, friends, and neighbors. Rion was the second kid in the castle. He was supposed to study his first year at Yukishina but ended up studying abroad after someone in his family passed away. What I knew from him was he was studying at soccer school at Hawaii. Aki was the third kid in the castle, but she was the first to be invited. She made an impact to me because she was so mature when they all met Kokoro for the first time. She was the first to spoke up among the group and I felt sister vibes from her, so when it was revealed that she was in her third year, I'm glad I was right. Despite her strong and mature vibe, she was facing something dark at home. It was the moment before she came back to the castle in her school uniform. It seemed she was kind of saved by the Wolf Queen, who saw her circumstances. She was at the wake of her grandma, and when she was SA'd by someone in her family, not sure if it was her father, an uncle, or a boyfriend of her mother. It was not indicated in the movie. Orishino was the fourth kid and was also in his first year, similar to Kokoro and Rion. He would always bring food and snacks made by his mother and brag it to the girls. At first, he was teased that whoever he gave it to among the girls in the castle was the girl he liked. Also, he was the first to reveal among the group that all of them refused to go to school, so they should drop the act of even going. Masamune was the fifth kid in the castle and he was also in his second year, similar to Fuka. He loved to play games and introduce a portable game to Subaru. I can remember him to be the only one holding the PSP while they all first got into the castle. Subaru was the sixth kid in the castle and was in his third year. Similar to Aki, he was reading a chess book when he sat beside Masamune and introduced chess to Masamune as well. When he dyed his hair blonde, I noticed that Aki chose her boyfriend who had the same hair color, but honestly I shipped them because they're both in the same year. Not until I realized where they came from. The last to be invited and the last kid was Kokoro, the main protagonist of the story. She was in her first year, similar to Rion. And I'm not quite sure of what she likes or her entire personality, as this was just glossed over as the story goes. The numbers I mentioned were based on the years they were born, not on who came in first in the castle. And their numbers represent their hiding places in the fairy tale of the wolf and the seven little goats. If you're not familiar with the tale, I suggest you watch or read it now and come back to the video so you'd get what I mean. What all of them experienced as to why they were refusing to go to school was because of either bullying or social isolation. Now, I'm not sure how the bullying is in Japan or in Korea because it seems like it's always included in forms of media like manga, manhwa, anime series, or K-drama. I have my own experience in bullying during my student days, but it did not resort to anything physical, and that I was thankful about. I have my friends that time, so I didn't really felt alone. Most were verbal attacks or humiliation, similar to Kokoro, but nothing to the extent to what the whole class did to her, nor to Masamune. But my bullying days aren't over after my school days. I also have to experience this during my adulthood. And I would have to share that on another time. Now let's get back to Kokoro. I feel like the screen time for Kokoro and the gang was too fast. That I only get her side of being a victim of bullying and that she was a first year studying at Yukushina Junior High School. Not the side when she was happy and was being treated normally. So I didn't quite feel what her personality was like, not until I move in with the story. Whenever she attempts to leave the castle or comes across Rion, he would greet her and she would timidly greet back and smile a bit. I actually do ship them even though it wasn't determined in the story. Not until the last part, I guess, but still, it's not bad in hoping my ship would sail, right? Early access of Midori Draws is available in My Coffee. Just go to coffee.com/Lady Midori and go to my tip jar. You can choose two options. One is to give a one-time payment, or two is to choose a monthly subscription for me to continue making contents like this. Other than the early access, your reward includes full high-resolution image of the fan art featured in this episode. Did you like a previous fan art I featured in one of my YouTube videos? No worries. Head over to My Coffee and send me a message which fan art you wish to purchase in my coffee shop. I will create a customized version for you to purchase. Now let's get back to the video. When I first saw this coming to the theaters, I invited my friends that we see it. But as time passed, I didn't know when it was released. Plus, I didn't have the finances, hence I'm glad it was released on Netflix. What I like about this film was that it was similar to the comics I wanted to make, which was entitled The Mirror of Wishes. Some of you who came from my DeviantArt or from my webcomic probably has seen me promoting it or sharing details about it. The premise is the same. There's a mirror where teenagers get in and they get transported to another world and they get to have a wish. Kokoro and the gang were not merely invited by the lonely castle because they were the chosen ones. I usually like the chosen one trope, but I realized it was too cliche to be written. So I changed my mind. Everyone was there because they have one similarity. They were all not going to school because of bullying or social isolation, and they go to the same school. When Kokoro managed to tell her mother what actually happened at school, I felt her warmth. Her mother helped her make a way to solve it. Children don't usually open up to their parents when something happens to them at school, especially if they aren't close to their parents or their whole family. To avoid being a burden to them. Usually, adults barely interfere when bullying happens at school, whether it's a parent or a teacher. Rich and entitled kids get away with everything, especially if their parents were people in power. Remember that I mentioned that this was somehow based on the fairy tale of the wolf and the seven little goats? I haven't read it, but when I search about it, I can remember the plot. You'll notice it at Moe's house and her mentioning about it. The X marks in the castle were symbols of where the seven little kids hid when they were being chased by the wolf. Kokoro had to borrow it from Moe so she could show it to her fellow castle residents. I say this because it didn't feel like they were really friends. So let's move on to what I disliked about the film. Just as I mentioned, the seven teenagers did not seem like they got close over the year of staying and hanging out in the castle. I was hoping they saw each other as friends, granted that they don't even have friends of their own who'd listen to them, probably except Kokoro. Also, the novel was cramped into a 2-hour frame that I didn't get to take in the emotions of the other characters. I thought that I wasn't going to get any backstories for all the 7 characters. Sure, there was a glimpse, but I feel like I had to read the novel to feel them. Maybe if this was a series, then I'd get to feel their backstories and their personalities. I did feel empathy with Aki's backstory because I had a similar experience that I'd probably share if I can. I'd probably chose to do what she did, and I understand why she did it. Other than that, there were plot holes like how the castle was made, like where the magic came from, why is there a 7-year gap from all of them, why they were chosen to be invited in there in the first place, was the mirror really a portal, or were they all dreaming at the same time because they felt lonely? Because the castle may be magnificent, but it's rather empty. It doesn't offer any food or water that'll make them stay any longer or dream of living in there. It's like a temporary escape from reality. Similar to the Disney Wish, it had a lot of characters that was squeezed in with a time frame, and it ended with me asking more questions. Except that this is a novel, so maybe the novel makes much more sense than the film. For that, I'm not sure. I actually feel like if something like this existed in reality, and it lets you meet up with people who feel alone and had no one to turn to, then the world may be a better place. Imagine if adults were the ones who were invited in there. I can already see the chaos happening. The 7 would probably fight off one another, manipulate, lie, and do everything, even taking someone else's life just to get the key. But I doubt that they will be granted a wish. since the Wolf Queen did mention that if they wished correctly, they can return to their lives with their memories wiped out. My favorite part was when they all agreed to meet outside the castle, meaning in real life. Of course, I already had a hunch of what would happen, but I kind of hoped that they would all meet up and be friends in real life. It's bittersweet when they came back to the castle and asked one another why they weren't there. And they found their answers a bit late. They all came from a different time but went to the same school. Editing Midori here, just realized it was Subaru who was the oldest amongst them and not Fuka. Subaru is the oldest as he came from 1985, Aki is from 1992, the missing cap which is 1999 is for you to find out. Kokoro and Ryun are both from the 2006, Masamune is from the year 2013, and Fuka is from the year 2020, while Orishino is from the present, which is year 2027. The time layer mirrors your name, meeting beyond time and space. The reality is bullying is a cycle. There will always be a bully, a bystander, and a victim. If you have been a bully and you were aware of it, or refuse to acknowledge it because you believe your target deserved it, or you think lowly of them, then think that your words pierced them, and that wound would forever be a part of them. Words, actions that cannot be taken back, and a scar that cannot be seen. You may think it's shits and giggles until something happens to you, them standing up to you, or your target, them unsubscribing to life, which I think a bully wouldn't even feel guilty to. If you're a bystander, you probably feel safe by laughing on the side and agreeing with the bully, or feel bad for the victim. You are afraid to speak up or do anything because you might be the next target. Sometimes it's better that way to avoid trouble, right? If you are a victim and you're still here, then congratulations, you are a survivor. I'm a fellow victim, so nice to meet you. I hope you have your support circle who you can depend on your darkest times, because it's really hard dealing with these things alone. I know because I'm currently dealing with a lot alone. Rating 3/5. Is Lonely Castle in the Mirror worth watching? For me, it's just okay to watch. The animation is great but the music isn't compatible with some scenes. The plot was okay and predictable, yet I managed to understand the whole story. That left me questions to ponder too. The message about bullying and family problems weren't dealt with very well. It only showed what every teenager have experienced from different time periods, and the cycle of bullying suppresses time. Before I forget, if you're going to watch it on Netflix, watch the credit scene because I missed it and and when I was watching Watch or Pass channels review about The Lonely Castle in the Mirror, he mentioned it, so I had to go back and watch the credit scene and it teared me up. So I was having multiple ideas on how to draw the characters. Like, I'm planning to just draw Rion and Kokoro since I shipped them. But I wanted to draw all of them and decided to let the Wolf Queen to be holding them as dolls. Since her face wasn't shown through the whole film, I just drew her with wolf ears instead to make her look adorable. How I arrange the dolls is similar to how they would come across one another in the real world. If you want to get what I mean, here's the video of what happened after their life outside the castle. And here's the final version of how I see the Wolf Queen and her captives. And her little Red Riding Hoods. I was debating whether I'd let them wear red hoods, but she's already wearing a red dress, so I decided to just draw what they were wearing in the poster. Okay. How about you? What do you think of The Lonely Castle in the Mirror? Did you watch it on Netflix yet? Or have you read the novel or the manga? What do you think of the story? Comment your thoughts below. See you in my next video.